Hello and welcome to my shop. My name is George and I'm coming to you from Chelsea, Quebec. Now, what with all this COVID stuff coming around, I won't step into your place. I'll just stay here behind the camera. Today, a little bit of a delicatessen of things. I'll talk about my second table saw. So this is not a replacement, but an actual number 2 saw in my shop. I spent the last month or so putting together a new computer. It's relevant a little bit because there's some woodworking involved. I made a base instead of using a case. And also it's going to be the computer that I'll be making videos on. And I'll round out today's video with a few photos of Keith's kayak, a little bit of an update. So why would anyone want to add a job site saw when they already have a cabinet saw? Well, I have lousy work habits. Picture this. The cabinet saw has a dado stack in it. 5 or 6 pieces, work pieces get run through it, and I find now the next piece wasn't cut to the right width. So I need to use a different kind of blade in my table saw. Undo the dado stack, put in a ripping blade, make the rip, put the dado stack back in, readjust the fence to the right thing. Just asking for trouble with all of that. So much easier if I had a second table saw. I saw this little number on sale in a big box store, $200 Canadian. I grabbed it. And I've got to tell you, this little saw has completely surpassed my expectations. I get beautiful finish cuts with it. So that was a really smart purchase on my part. But what I really want to focus on is the throat plates that I made for it. Now, there are dozens and dozens of YouTube videos that show you how to make a zero clearance throat plate for your table saw. So I won't go into those details, but what I will do is talk about the embellishments, and 2 of them are shown right here. So one is that I've installed a riving knife. That's the first embellishment. And then the second one is that there is a parallel kerf, right? There's a kerf on the right in parallel to the kerf that's being used in this picture. So I'll talk about that as well. So why a second kerf? Well, the riving knife doesn't rise and fall with the blade height. And if I'm making a through cut, that's not a problem. But if all I want to do is make a shallow kerf that doesn't cut the board, then the riving knife gets in the way. So to get around that, I roll the throat plate 180 degrees and use it this way. Here's the throat plate turned with the riving knife now below grade. The blade will come up through the kerf on the left. And so this is the arrangement I use when I want to make a scoring cut or a shallow kerf without cutting through the workpiece. I use the regular method to make the kerfs for the saw blades. So imagine now the throat plate has no cuts in it. The blade itself is all the way down, so it's completely clear of the throat plate. Put the throat plate in its place, and then you bring in something to hold the throat plate down, something that doesn't bleed. In my case, the fence had a little bit of a gap between it and the table saw. So I just added a couple of wedges to make sure that it was bearing down on the throat plate. So again, the blade is completely below. You turn the saw on and then very slowly raise the blade until it reaches its maximum height. So that takes care of how you make the kerfs for the saw blade. But how do you make the extended kerf to accommodate the riving knife? Here again, you have to imagine that the throat plate doesn't have the riving knife in it yet, and it doesn't have the extended cut. So how do you go about making the extended cut? Well, it starts by reinstalling the throat plate that came with the table saw. Again, for this photo, we're pretending that the riving knife and the extended kerf don't yet exist. So here, with a little bit of trial and error, you want the workpiece to be pushed up against the fence, and the blade should be completely free to spin. So the power is turned off, the saw is unplugged. With your fingertips, you're moving the blade forward and backwards, just rotating it a little bit, making sure that it doesn't snag either the left or the right side of the kerf. When you find that sweet spot, you're aligned and you're ready to make the extended kerf. So one last time, we're pretending that the extended cut has not yet been made. The arriving blade is not yet there, but you found the sweet spot for the fence and you're ready now to make the extended cut. In my case, I made the extended cut just stopping short of the blade's kerf, so that gives me a little bit of a bridge between where the blade is and where the arriving knife is. The last part of things would be to make the arriving knife. In this case, it was 3D printed, but you can use some brass stock or some aluminum stock to fashion a blade of your own. That's it for the embellishments that I've made to the throat plate. Let's move on now, and I'll talk about my new computer. So I spent the last month or so researching components, watching YouTube videos to see how to put them together, matching the specs so that the components worked well together. I did not want to use a case. Instead, I made a base. So there's the woodworking angle to it. The base has an ash field and walnut edging. And I've mounted the thing on the wall. So you can see my hobbies coming together on this. So the woodworking is entrenched in the base. The 3D printing, so all the things that you see in red were 3D printing, including the brackets that are holding the shelf up. Now, I don't trust the brackets completely. And so for that reason, I've also slapped together a little bit of scaffolding that's sitting just under the shelf, sitting there to catch the thing if it should come crashing down. I'll close now with an updated set of photos of Keith's kayak. If you have not seen the earlier set, then I should give you a moment or two to catch your breath. If you have seen the earlier set, then you might not discern much of a difference, and that's because the time between was spent preparing the hull for finish. So that involved an awful lot of sanding and fairing. Along the way, Keith discovered a separation in the inlay that he wasn't happy with, so that involved a little bit of repair work. Once it is finished, it's going to pop. Keith, I can't get over how beautiful your build is shaping up, and I'm looking forward to another installment from you. So that's it for now. Thank you for staying through till all the way till here. And remember, indulge your passion, and if you can share it, even better.